Hello to all the real progressives out there. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We have an awesome show for you. I'm really excited. I did an interview just this morning with a few activists for the M4A group who are planning an event in October in San Francisco. Excited to bring you guys that clip and tell you all about it. We're going to go over some of the Evergrande situation, the potential financial crisis resulting from Evergrande. A Chinese they're real estate, but they really do a whole heck of a lot more than that too, and severely over leveraged. And we're going to get into that just momentarily. We're going to talk about George W. Bush being protested by an Iraq war veteran. We're going to go over some more perfect union clips that talk about some labor organizing going on around the country and abuse of workers at the hands of major companies. We have an infrastructure update for you today, so lots of important stuff to dive into. I do want to start with the Real Progressives plugs per usual. You guys know the drill, realprogressives.org. If you want to find out more about us or contribute to our Patreon, you can find all of our content there, articles, podcasts, etc. Make sure that you go to our website to find out more about us or help us out if you would like. And I also want to do a plug for the new Untouchables. I have a clip here. I'm going to show you Thomas Frank on tonight's episode. Make sure you don't miss that. And also, huge shout out to Patrick and Eric, who were on Crystal Kyle and Friends. If you haven't seen that clip, I encourage you to do so. They also, Breaking Points, posted a portion of that interview just this morning. And then I was kind of pleasantly surprised to see that. So huge shout out to Patrick and Eric and the gang for getting the word out about the new Untouchables. And if you haven't seen any of those seasons yet, make sure that you don't miss tonight's episode. Go catch up at Real Progress in Action's YouTube channel if you want to find all of those episodes as well. So we will start here with that teaser here for the new Untouchables. Make sure that you don't miss tonight's episode. Thomas Frank, by the way, you guys, one of my very favorite people in politics. He's fantastic. If you haven't read Listen Liberal or What's the Matter with Kansas or any of this kind of stuff, he's a really brilliant political analyst and was quite an influence on me. So it's exciting to see him joining the new Untouchables this evening.
For all of this political involvement, we're all drawn to the kind of the culture war of the thing. And, the other side is just so absolutely intolerable. And what they're doing is just so repellent and repugnant. And we can't believe this is happening. For all of that, the grand questions still seem to escape us. And what I'm referring to are, well, the grand question of who owns this country and why does the wealth continues to get hoovered up into the bank accounts of a very small number of people. And this has continued and continued and continued. For all of our politicization, we just can't seem to see it or to understand it. And I don't know what it's going to take to make that finally dawn on people. I mean, here we are, and Patrick, I know that you started on this with your inquiry into the financial crisis. And I always say that for my generation, I always thought that was going to be the biggest event of our lifetimes. It was so extraordinarily, devastating for the entire world, but also it was an X-ray right through our society. If you studied it, if you paid attention, you immediately understood how things worked and why things unfolded the way that they did. And I feel like those lessons are forgotten or lost or were never learned.
I am very excited for tonight's episode, you guys. They've had all sorts of fantastic guests on lately. Dennis Kucinich was on recently, and now Thomas Frank. Thomas is one of my very favorite people in politics. I really can't underscore that enough. So make sure you don't miss out on what is bound to be an absolutely fantastic episode. And again, if you missed Patrick and Eric's interview on Crystal Kyle and Friends, go check that out as well. And you can find a clip of that on Breaking Point's YouTube channel as well. So glad to see that starting to make the rounds and starting to get some eyes on it, because it's critically important stuff, you guys, to understand the financial sector and the corruption that leads to all sorts of harm to everyday people and to our society as a whole. So important to get educated on that stuff, and shout out to those guys. So like I said, I want to start with the Evergrande situation, you guys, and it's a pretty immensely complicated ordeal because of how intertwined they are in the global economy. Evergrande is listed as a real estate group, but they do a whole hell of a lot more than that. They own like a soccer team and a theme park, and they're involved in electric cars and like seltzer water or something like they have their hands in all sorts of industries. They owe like a couple hundred companies in China money. So they're like financially involved with all these big businesses in China. They also are financially involved with all sorts of big companies in America. A lot of American businesses own stock and bonds in Evergrande. So like they're so intertwined with everything. This kind of gets into the too big to fail thing that we ran into in 07, 08, which puts pressure on politicians to essentially excuse the corruption and fraudulent behaviors and casino style investments from these companies if they're deemed too big to allow to fail. Initially, it did very much look like China would probably bail them out because of the reverberating effects of Evergrande collapsing. I mean, it just would be so catastrophic to all these other portions of the economy. It now looks like they're actually not going to do that because there are so many people in China who would be so upset about this. I mean, I'll put it this way: over 1 million Chinese people have paid Evergrande for houses that have not yet been built. So if they were to collapse right now, you'd have over 1 million Chinese people left without houses, right? And having paid for a house that they never got. So there would be tremendous public uproar about this. And there really already is tremendous public uproar about Evergrande and how they've conducted their business. So China is in a spot where they essentially they either have to condone the behavior by bailing them out and basically say like our regulations, our lines mean nothing. For those that don't understand, Xi Jinping has set what he calls 3 red lines, right? So they're like designed to regulate the way that financial firms do business, and if they cross any of the red lines, then actions have to be taken to bring them back to reality, to disallow them from causing financial harm to the rest of the economy, right? Well, Evergrande is in violation of all 3 right now. So if China bails them out, they're basically saying those red lines mean fuck all. They mean nothing. We're just willing to let you violate our red lines and then still bail you out. So they find themselves in a tricky spot, right? And this is part of the problem with designing our economies as we have and designing the global economy as we have. It's this very rapacious, very casino style version of capitalism. And it leaves governments in a place where they're engaged in the revolving door and other forms of corruption with these firms and with these industries. And then they're put in a place where they if they don't rein them in, they're going to cause immense harm to the economy. So you can see how they've kind of created this themselves. And I don't just mean China. I mean, this is very similar to the 07, 08 situation. It's been compared to the Lehman Brothers and how that could have reverberating effects around the global economy. So I've seen mixed opinions on how much of an effect an Evergrande crash would have on our economy. But in either case, I mean, when you're that intertwined with all of these other businesses and industries, and when we have an economy that is so global, I really can't see any situation where their crash doesn't have reverberating effects around the world, right? They're such a massive country, and they're involved in so much business with so many other countries around the world, including the United States. And just to give you guys an idea of the gravity of the situation, over a third of China's economy is real estate. That is way more than even the United States was at during our crash. So, and they're a larger country than we are. So that creates a recipe for disaster, right? And yet I'm not suggesting that like China bail them out. That's not my suggestion. I'm just pointing out that we have set ourselves up as a global economy. We have set ourselves up to fail when large firms like Evergrande, huge firms like Evergrande, end up crashing, which their business model dictates will eventually happen one way or another, right? They literally rely on increasing housing prices to be able to borrow money against an appreciating asset. And if all of a sudden the housing market changes, their whole business model falls apart and they crash. They're just so over leveraged that they can't do anything about it. So they behave these ways, and this is the same with Wall Street. They behave these ways on the assumption that the government will bail them out when they get themselves in trouble, not if, when they get themselves in trouble. And that is an indictment on our entire system. It's an indictment on our political system. It's an indictment on our culture, all this, like everything that contributes to that decision-making process that allows these giant financial firms to feel so comfortable engaging in such a casino style of business. So it will be very fascinating to see what happens here. This has the potential to be a really fucking huge deal, you guys. Like world economy crash kind of a big fucking deal. So we'll have to see what happens here. China has started to indicate that they're not going to bail them out. They sent out memos basically telling financial firms to get ready, like to prepare for the crash. I mean, it appears like they're going to let Evergrande collapse. And again, I don't have a perfect answer to this, you guys, because both answers suck. I don't want a crash that whether it mostly hits China or whether it ends up being a worldwide global crash. I don't want that. Nobody wants that. We also don't want to let companies like this get away with this kind of stuff, because that sends the message going forward that, China's red lines mean nothing. Just like Obama basically signaled to Wall Street, hey, what we say means absolutely nothing. You can violate all of our demands. You can violate even laws. You can commit fraud. You can be corrupt, and we still will not only not prosecute you, we will bail you out and let all of the execs who made these decisions walk away with fat bonuses and golden parachutes. Right? That's the message that was sent by Barack Obama and his administration, and that would be the message that would be sent by Ping and the Chinese Communist Party if they were to bail out Evergrande in this situation. So, it's the perfect answer would be not to set things up this way from the jump. Right? It would be to go back and say from inception, we're not going to create a system that has this kind of vulnerability and that's going to create this kind of harm for people around the world. So it will be fascinating to see what comes of all of this. But for me right now, it's just an all in all concerning situation that doesn't really have any good potential outcomes. So we will keep an eye on that going forward. Has the potential to be a really huge story. And I hope that I'm wrong in the extent to which this could be harmful for the global economy. Fantastic clip here, you guys. This just absolutely warms my heart. If you haven't seen it, an Iraq war veteran disrupted George W. Bush and called him out for his lies and war crimes. This is like, seriously, we need so much more of this. And I hope to see more of this. George W. Bush has somehow been rehabilitated by virtually every portion of the media, right? Where there's this tendency to treat him like a sweet old man who makes paintings instead of the war criminal who killed over 1 million Iraqis and sent a whole bunch of Americans overseas to die or lose limbs or come back with PTSD. The man who destabilized, the man who went to great lengths to continue the destabilizing of the Middle East. The man's a war criminal. He belongs at The Hague. Okay, he's not a sweet old man. Do not rehabilitate war criminals. That's the message here. But this is just seriously fantastic clip. If you guys haven't seen it yet, enjoy.
Mr. Bush, when are you going to apologize for the million Iraqis that are dead because you lied? You lied about weapons of mass destruction. You lied about connections to 9/11. You lied about Iraq being a threat. You sent me to Iraq. You sent me to Iraq in 2003. My friends are dead. Joshua Castile. You killed people. You lied. You lied about WMDs. A million Iraqis are dead because you lied. My friends are dead because you lied. You need to apologize. Apologize.
Brilliant stuff. For George W. Bush to have to face even just a moment of looking someone in the face who he did immense harm to, incalculable harm to. This guy saying, my friends died. We went over there for you and your cause, and me and my friends suffered because of it. A million Iraqis died because of you. You need to apologize. I love it. I absolutely love it. One of the things that bothers me more than almost anything in modern politics, and that is quite a fucking bar, as I'm sure many of you know, is the rehabilitation of George W. Bush and his ilk. When fucking Ellen DeGeneres sat there, was it at a football game or something, sat there with him at a football game and then came out and said, that he was a friend or whatever. When Michelle Obama says he's one of my good friends and yada, yada. By the way, when Barack Obama was at Barack Obama's inauguration, George W. Bush walked with him through DC to go to the inauguration. And there was this moment, Obama wrote about it in his memoir, that where he said he saw protesters protesting Bush for his war crimes, like literally for war crimes, crimes against humanity. And Obama's response was to call that classless and tasteless. Basically said, you shouldn't protest a guy in the last hour of his presidency. Like, that is who the political establishment is, right? You can commit war crimes. Since you're part of our club, we think you shouldn't have to face protests for that. And then, of course, Obama, who ran on the opposite, ended up turning 2 wars into 7 and continuing the crimes against humanity that his predecessors had started, and then winning a Nobel Prize for all of the drone strikes that he did and all of the innocent people that he killed. So it just, to see George W. Bush rehabilitated is particularly, it's like a gut punch. And part of it, you guys might like, just for a little bit of context, I started paying attention to politics during George W. Bush's presidency. Like, that was just when I was at the age where you start kind of paying attention to what's going on in the world, And I remember how viscerally even partisan Democrats, like not lefties, but like partisan liberal Democrats, I remember the ire that they had for George W. Bush and Dick Cheney and the Republicans in those days. And to see him rehabilitated, mostly because of Trump, right? It was just a contrast to Trump, is disgusting. It's nauseating. It makes me feel physically ill that people could sit there and go, well, he seems nice when he does an interview, and look, he does paintings, and like, we can forgive him for all of the fucking people he killed and all the wars he started and all the destabilization he contributed to, all the torture, Guantanamo Bay, all the, like, we can forgive him. Fuck it. That it's nauseating. It's gross. So to see somebody taking a stand like that and disrupting an event and saying right to his face, you need to apologize. You killed 1 million Iraqis. You killed my friends. Apologize. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. We need to see a lot more of that kind of action for previous and current politicians who are committing these kinds of crimes. And it should extend beyond foreign policy too, you guys. Like, you're letting people die of lack of access to healthcare. That should be a crime. You need to apologize. You're letting people be home, well over 500,000 people be homeless every night in the streets of this country, when you could just pass a federal jobs guarantee and housing reform like that. That should be a crime. You need to apologize. Like, we need more of that. We really do need more of that. We need more connecting the policy to the everyday effect that policy has on people. So to say, look, your foreign policy killed my friends, it doesn't get much more powerful than that. To say your domestic policy is killing people who need healthcare, it's killing impoverished people, doesn't get much more powerful than that, right? Our founder and CEO, Steve Grumbine, his Twitter handle is austerity is murder. And I absolutely love that. It is. It's murder. It's deciding to let people suffer and die as a policy choice. not out of incompetence, not out of a lack of understanding. No, pure decision. It's an explicit choice. This is a quote that I've dropped all the time. You guys will probably get tired of hearing me say it, but Stephanie Kelton says that when the MMT coin drops, you realize the suffering is gratuitous. I think that sums it up quite nicely. It's not incompetence. It's not mismanagement. It is a decision. It's a policy choice to let people suffer and die. And to see George W. Bush called out for that in that manner, in that tone, I cannot get enough of that. That's fantastic. It warms my heart to see that shit. So huge shout out to that dude. And I'd like to see more of that going on all over the country. And we have another clip here that kind of warms my heart, guys. Actually, somewhat of a positive show today in some respects. Okay, that's for once. I have some positive things to show you guys, including this clip. A worker at Walmart decided to quit and did so in a fashion that just, again, warms my heart. If you guys haven't seen this, please enjoy. It's quite the clip.
All right. Attention Walmart shoppers and associates. My name is Beth from Electronics. I've been working at Walmart for almost 5 years, and I can say that everyone here is overworked and underpaid. The attendant policy is bullshit. We are treated from management and customers poorly every day. Whenever we have a problem with it, we're told that we're replaceable. I'm tired of the constant gaslighting. This company treats their elderly associates like shit. To Jared, our store manager, you're a pervert. Greta and Kathy, shame on y'all for treating your associates the way you do. I hope you don't speak to your families the way you speak to us. Shout out to Cominique, Patty, Chardell, and so many more. Walmart doesn't deserve y'all. Fuck management and fuck this job. I quit.
You love to see it. You love to see it. That's how many like retail and food service workers and just service industry in general, how many people want to do that and can't because they're economically constrained in a way that disallows them from losing their job. That is brilliant. That is fantastic. I love it. Tell all the customers, tell everyone else in the store why you're leaving. Make sure that Walmart knows you're going to be public about it. This, we cover all the time, you guys, how these kinds of businesses abuse their workers and how they engage in corruption to ensure that there aren't laws and regulations that disallow them from abusing their workers. They exploit people, right? You guys all know, like dozens of stories are popping into your heads right now, right? We're going to cover more later today. More Perfect Union, talking about how Hilton and Apple and Pfizer are abusing their workers, right? I mean, this is just how capitalism tends to turn out. This is how a firm is going to behave when given the kind of power that our country has given them, and when they get to exploit workers to this degree without any intervention from the public sector. So that warmed my heart, you guys, to see somebody just saying, fuck you, I quit. And going down the list of the names, right? Her GM, you're a pervert. Just boom, right in your fucking face. I love to see that. She says Walmart workers are overworked and underpaid, that they treat their senior workers like shit, that their attendance policy is bullshit, right? That's probably referring to absolutely no paid time off, sick days or vacation days or any of this stuff, maternity, paternity leave, any of that stuff. Just call that out like that on the fucking speaker. I love it. I absolutely love it. And even if there's if she somehow faces some sort of punishment for that, which I can't imagine she really can, because she's quitting. What can they do? Fire her? But, if there's any response from Walmart, it just won't meet what she was able to accomplish by doing that, because that clip makes the rounds online and people see it. And Walmart might be able to punish her personally in some capacity that I'm unaware of. But in either case, they're going to be damaged by that. Their reputation is continuing to be damaged by stuff like that, and should be. I mean, it's damaged almost implies they didn't deserve it. They do. They very much deserve it. Their reputation should be absolute shit, and hopefully this contributes to bringing public opinion along to the truth on this matter. So a couple of clips there I wanted to start with you guys that just like, honestly, usually politics is so, it's like a downer. It's so pessimistic. It's so, I feel so cynical all the time and kind of jaded. And to see those kind of clips, it gave me a little inspiration and kind of warmed my heart. So we're going to get on now to the More Perfect Union clips I have today. I actually have 3 of them, and I use these guys' clips a lot. I really want to encourage you to follow them if you don't already. More Perfect Union on Twitter. They cover like all sorts of labor organizing issues, exploitation of workers, strikes, demonstrations, protests. They really try to highlight the stuff that the mainstream media not even refuses to cover, like sort of suppresses and intentionally avoids and refuses to tell people about, because their big advertisers are the very perpetrators of the problems that More Perfect Union is willing to tell you about. So we're going to start with a video about Line 3 protesters and how many Minnesota police departments are treating them. We'll watch this clip, come back and discuss.
Basically, hold you in a headlock and then focused first on a pressure point that's right below my ear, forced his thumb in there for probably 30 to 45 seconds.
So he like grabbed the left side of my head, and with his other hand he just like started pressing in right below this ear and just like started getting harder and harder and harder, and it like I could feel my eardrum, like the pressure start building here. And it was like right on the nerve, so it really hurt, and I started screaming.
He was pushing so hard into my nasal cavity that my nasal airways were completely blocked. I don't think I was getting enough oxygen. But there was another sheriff's deputy standing there. And I could feel that my right side of my face wasn't working anymore.
First he put me in a headlock, and then he proceeded pressing really hard with his fingers here and sort of moving them up and down and sideways. As somebody who has given birth, the level of pain was like beyond that.
I'm here in solidarity with the fight against Line 3, demanding the end of this pipeline, the end of settler colonialism and extraction across the globe.
I can't breathe, you're covering my mouth.
You are hurting him!
That's the point. It's called pain compliance.
After they thought that it was long enough, they left me and said, "I'll give you a minute to think about that." They moved on to the person that was on the other side of me, who was a woman.
And then they came around to me a second time and focused on a pressure point that was right under my nose and above my lip.
And he took my head again and started pressing on my pressure point again. And then I felt him put all of his weight on it. And that's when I got really scared, and I kind of felt like my eardrum was gonna break. And then he moved to my teeth and like right here, and like started pressing up into my nose. And I felt my my teeth were gonna fall out.
When I saw the doctor, I tried to explain what had been happening to me, and he informed me that I had Bell's palsy, that it could be temporary or it could be permanent, that this could be for the rest of my life.
They did give me the diagnosis of Bell's palsy on the right side of my face. They got me off the bed and put me back in cuffs and took me to the jail. And when they tried to take my mugshot, I really tried to smile the entire time they were trying to take the picture, because even when I do it now, you can see that this side of my face doesn't move.
I was charged with felony theft, which has a maximum penalty of up to 10 years in prison. I was charged with gross misdemeanor trespass on critical infrastructure at the behest of energy companies to specifically criminalize people who are fighting fossil fuel projects and fighting energy projects. These charges and the actions of law enforcement, people should see that it's actually a growing trend. So while the state of Minnesota, while the Biden administration, while the US government decides to expand fossil fuel infrastructure and allow companies to destroy the water and destroy the earth, while they fail to do their job to protect the earth, people are having to protect the earth on their own, and we're being called terrorists.
So terrifying clip there. Fantastic coverage, but a terrifying clip. The police just, I mean, I think that response where early on in the video, he said, you know, he told the cop, you're hurting him. And the cop said, yeah, that's the point. It's pain compliance. I mean, what else do you need to know? And that it's not just that they so openly admit that, it's that they're so comfortable in openly admitting. Like they don't even see that as something that they should be concerned about saying. This is, you guys, law enforcement in this country is such a spoiled and tainted field that it just needs to be abolished, and we need to start from scratch. We obviously need some sort of department, right, to like enforce laws and to deal with the occasionally violent people that you would have even in a healthy society. But the way police have conducted themselves over the entire history of this nation is so out of step with what the public actually thinks police are there for that we just need to start from scratch. And I also want to point out, I've talked a lot about the climate crisis on this channel. And how it's much worse than we have thought, how the, you know, the alarmists of the climate scientists have kind of largely been proven right in recent times, and how behind we are on addressing that crisis. And I want to point out that it is very often indigenous groups who are leading the charge on this stuff. Very often the case. And this is the case with Line 3. It was the case with the North Dakota pipeline. It was Dakota Access. It's the case with a whole lot of these fossil fuel and energy projects that have the potential to be detrimental to the environment. It's often indigenous communities that come forward and take a stand. And then this is how police treat them. Right? I remember horrific stories from North Dakota. I remember that one woman lost her arm because cops threw a concussion grenade into a crowd. That officer should be in prison. Like, what else do you say to that? You know what I mean? People getting shot with non-lethal munitions. In freezing temperatures, they were spraying people with water cannons. You know, I mean, it's violence. It's assault that police inflict upon communities who are doing nothing more than trying to defend the environment. But it tells you who police serve, because the very people they're assaulting are the people that they pledge to protect and serve. Yet who do they actually end up working for? They work for big oil and big energy. That's whose bidding they do. It tells you right off the bat. They're there inherently. What they're there to do is to protect the assets of the rich from the poor. That's what police do. So it's really like most of their job definition is to protect the assets of the rich. So this is just a continuation of that same pattern. And it should concern everybody, the response that police have when you say to them, oh, you're hurting them. Yeah, I know. That's the point. It's pain compliance. I'm trying to. That should concern everybody. And we all should get involved in whatever ways we possibly can. If there's local protests going on around you guys that have to do with environmentalism and protesting pipelines and big energy companies who pollute and who do damage to our environment. And by the way, damage to humans too. And it's often impoverished communities that end up taking the brunt of this. I mean, how do you guys think a lot of our like water supplies become so problematic? A lot of it has to do with like drilling and chemical companies and energy companies. But they're always doing this to poor communities, right? You don't see the rich suburban white communities getting hit with this kind of environmental assault. You just see it happening to poor communities and neighborhoods. So I really want to point out, you guys, that it's often indigenous groups who are leading the charge on this stuff, and you should get involved and support those groups when they are opposing, pipelines and other, industrial projects that end up wreaking havoc, rather, on our environment and on the people who live in those areas. So. And I also want to point out, you guys, that, and I've mentioned this a number of times too, but the Democrats love to run on this stuff. They love to run on green campaigns. They love to talk about how the climate crisis is a huge deal and how we need to address it. They love to slam Republicans for not addressing the climate crisis and for opposing actions to deal with the climate crisis. And then what do Democrats do when they get in office? They approve a bunch of drilling permits, right? Biden canceled one pipeline that was garnering a lot of attention, and then he went and approved like a dozen drilling permits, right? Gavin Newsom did something very similar in California. He ran on a green campaign, and then he approved a bunch of drilling permits. So this is nothing new in the sense that the political establishment will take an opportunity to use rhetoric against in a partisan way against their opponents for electoral gains, and then they'll turn around and do fuck all about it and let the planet burn on their watch. And I also want to tie it into the earlier stories. I said we need more direct calling out politicians for this kind of shit. This is another area where we need that, you guys. You should apologize. You're burning our planet. You're making our planet uninhabitable. You should apologize. You're creating problems for water systems in poor places. You should apologize. That kind of thing. We need more of that. We really do. So good on these protesters and shame on Minneapolis police. By the way, also, Minnesota, whichever police department it happens to be. But they, following George Floyd, there were a number of other black men killed by Minneapolis. I keep saying Minneapolis. I mean Minnesota police departments around the state. And it very much appears that they have not only not learned their lesson, but are continuing to engage openly in violence against protesters. It's also worth noting that prior to Minneapolis PD killing George Floyd, they were one of the departments that went full-throated on Obama's reforms, right? The Obama administration's proposed police reforms. They took all of those suggestions and apparently were one of the departments that was going forward on that in ways that other departments were not. And yet they still, what do? They murder George Floyd in that fashion after they adopted all of these reforms. Doesn't work. They need to be abolished. We need to start from scratch. That you cannot reform a system that is as broken as law enforcement is. And actually, broken is not even the right word because it was designed to be what it is. But you guys know what I mean. You can't reform a system that is as problematic and harmful as law enforcement is, and tainted by racism and classism and all of these cultural problems that sort of underlie the issue of law enforcement. And I'll again note, my regular viewers will know this by heart, because I say this almost every time that police issues come up, but law enforcement in this country was born out of slave catchers, you guys. The sheriff star that you see on sheriff badges, that comes from slave catchers. Those were the first cops in this country. Okay, that's the system that we have developed. That's the roots of law enforcement in this country. So for them to treat indigenous protesters and environmentalists in this manner is hardly surprising, right? But good on those protesters, shame on the cops. And if you can get involved in these kinds of actions and organizing and activism, I really want to encourage you to. As I said, we have a couple more clips here. These are both More Perfect Union. Again, huge shout out to them. Go follow them if you're not following them. This is about how Hilton, the hotel chain, mistreats their workers in again, a kind of a classic situation. So we'll watch this clip and discuss.
Asking already for mercy, and that I don't supposed to beg. What would I tell the Hilton personnel? Have a heart.
My name is Mary Tabunyar. I'm a housekeeper in Hilton Hawaiian Village.
My name is Nelly Reynante. I work at Hilton Hawaiian Village Hotel for 4 years now. I'm a housekeeper there. We wait every day for our schedule, and then all of a sudden it stopped.
A lot of us is waiting for the call.
Depending on the occupancy and the no daily cleaning services, there's no hope. The last time I worked was August 23. That was Sunday morning.
I got no more UI. Unemployment is expired already. I have to go weekly to a food bank. Line up there, register every week just to put something to feed my family and my kids, yeah. So it's really hard.
I'm helping my husband to do yarding.
Right now we are uncertain if I can pay my rent or my other bills. All we want to do is like go back to work right now. Even they're gonna put me in overtime, I will do it.
You can imagine how dirty the room, especially the trashes, the towels piled up in the rooms, the sand, especially because we live in a beach.
Sometimes like they don't tell us like that floor was a quarantine floor. They don't even brief us like that. I work also in the graveyard shift. I'm working out by myself. There in the public area, we're dealing a lot of security matters there because it's really dangerous at night. Any kind of job that they're gonna ask you, you have to accept it. Yeah, if you don't accept it, your unemployment gonna be affected.
It's very clear that the hotel is not helping us.
We say fight back! We say fight back! We say fight back! Fight back!
To all the guests of the hotels, ask for a daily service for housekeeping. Ask for help for your car to park. Ask for food that you want in any area in your hotel. That's the only thing that will help us to be back.
I don't think the daily cleaning services will come back if we don't fight for it, if we don't come together as one, if we don't unite together. We are family, we are one big Ohana. Nobody should get left behind.
So another devastating set of circumstances, you guys, and this pandemic has allowed for large corporations to exploit both their workers and their customers. And I would draw a comparison here. What this kind of reminds me of, at least in some ways, is the situation with the airline industry. They took a huge chunk of cash in the initial stimulus package early on in the pandemic. And that cash came with conditions. You had to keep your employees on staff. Like it was basically here, this cash is to cover your payroll so that you don't have to fire everybody or let everybody go. It's designed to help the workers, right? So what they did is they took this money, and then the first day that they were allowed to lay people off again, they did. And I don't know about all airlines. I know American did this. I know United did this. And I'm sure others did as well. But the very first day, they lay off a whole bunch of their workers. And then when, we're back into this with Delta variant, we're back into another version of needing to be very careful about travel. But when there was a few months there where things were kind of opening back up and airlines were starting to get bookings again, all of a sudden American and United are complaining about not having enough workers. And they're canceling flights because they don't have enough workers to operate the flights. The very workers that they laid off just months earlier. And then they turned around and tried to pretend that the reason they couldn't get workers was because there was too much assistance coming from the public sector to help everyday people out during a time of economic turmoil. So the notion was, you're helping poor people too much, so we can't hire them. When the reality was, they had laid these workers off at the very first opportunity that they got. So if you actually want to take this like free market capitalistic view on this, then shouldn't you tell American and United to fucking pound sand? You made a decision that's now detrimental to your business. Guess what that means in a truly free market system? It means you're going to collapse. It means other airlines are going to fill that gap and you can go piss off. You know, but that's not at all how we treat these kinds of situations, right? Instead, the media jumps on board and accuses, you know, the federal government of helping people too much. And now we have a worker shortage. And I think you all know just how disingenuous that narrative is and how untrue that narrative is. But this reminded me of that quite a bit, where Hilton hotels, they don't drop their prices stay the same for a less service that the customer's getting, right? So that they're both screwing their customer over by making them pay for a lesser experience. And then they're also screwing their workers over in the manners described there in the video, by refusing to give them hours, by making the conditions in which they work worse, all this kind of stuff. And you can also imagine, guys, in this kind of like, I work in kitchens, right? I'm a cook. I've been a cook for quite some time. It just help pay the bills, right? And I see it in the restaurant industry, how dangerous it can be, because you're having to interact with people on a regular basis who you don't know how seriously they're taking the virus. You don't know if they're vaccinated. You don't know if they might have COVID, right? And you're having to interact with them for your job. I mean, that's dangerous shit, you guys. So you imagine being one of these workers at Hilton and being thrust into poor working conditions, getting less hours than you need to pay your bills, and having to constantly worry, like, is this guest got COVID? Is this gonna harm my health or kill me, or am I gonna pass this on to a loved one? And Hilton, of course, could give a fuck. They take full advantage. They exploit, mistreat everybody involved so that their executives and shareholders can walk away with some nice fat bonuses and dividends. So this is it's a continuing pattern in a whole lot of industries, right? And I really like to bring you guys the specifics so that you can see everyday people explaining how this affects their lives, right? And we have one more video kind of along these lines. Again, More Perfect Union, just huge shout out to them. This is how janitors have been mistreated by companies like Apple and Pfizer. We'll take a watch and then come back and discuss.
The story of the janitors is the David versus Goliath story. It's the story of immigrant workers, essential service workers that are up against the commercial real estate giants.
Durante la pandemia estuvimos ganando lo que es el sueldo mínimo. A nosotros nos estaban pagando $14.
We have seen exploitation, we have seen wage theft, we have seen rape on the night shift.
Nosotros nos cuidábamos, pero las compañías no nos cuidaban a nosotros.
Many of them died during the pandemic, ensuring that these buildings were disinfected and clean. Many of them contracted the virus, and they are still living in poverty in the state of California and across this country.
Lo más difícil que teníamos, a lo que nos estábamos siempre enfrentando, es que a las compañías no nos querían proporcionar el equipo para protegernos.
Soy madre de 3 hijos y el llegar a casa y pensar, tal vez lo traigo, tal vez los puedo enfermar.
Nos obligaron a trabajar más de lo debido, sin ningún aumento.
Recorto comida, recorto biles, pero la renta se tiene que pagar. ¿Por qué? Porque no me gustaría llevar a mis hijos a vivir abajo de un puente en mi carro.
So we are asking these contractors and these commercial real estate giants to treat janitors with the dignity and respect that they deserve. When you walk the streets of downtown San Diego in the middle of the night and you see a light turned on, that is a janitor who has most likely crossed the bridge from Tijuana with their work visa, gotten here, and is cleaning these toilets, disinfecting your floors, throwing out your trash, disinfecting your desks so that you could come to work.
So again, mistreatment of workers that are perceived to be low level or low skill, or any of these tropes that they like to throw around to justify their exploitation. And these, big companies, guys, Netflix, Pfizer, right? Apple, big, huge fucking companies. It's such a pattern. At a certain point, I don't know what to say in analysis because you guys have already all heard what I have to say about this. I really want to make sure to drive home how prevalent these stories are. And I want to make sure that you all are hearing from the people who have these stories to tell. And again, huge shout out to More Perfect Union. I know I've said that a few times already, but just for bringing us that real personal story to get to hear from people who are victimized by this kind of economic exploitation and to hear how it affects their lives, I think makes it very real in a way that, we can sit here and have more theoretical discussions about this stuff, but that doesn't put a face to it. That doesn't, that woman sitting there saying, listen, I might not be able to afford my house. Me and my 3 children are going to be living in a fucking car under the bridge. Like to hear someone saying that has more impact on a lot of people than me sitting here and explaining on a macro level how the economics work or whatever, right? So huge shout out to them. If you don't follow More Perfect Union, please do so. And thanks to them for bringing us these kinds of stories. Line 3 is a huge story, and we're going to continue to keep up on that going forward. It's got a number of angles to it too, right? It's got the police abuse angle, it's got the environmental angle, it's got the indigenous angle, and also the economic corruption and what have you that pertains to the oil companies being able to grasp a hold of our energy sector like they have. So huge story there, huge story with the Hilton abuse of maids, and now we also see janitors being abused by these big companies. So we'll keep up on these stories as they develop, but I really want to encourage everybody to get involved with labor organizing, to support local workers who are protesting and striking and things like this. Make sure you're doing what you can, because we're all in this together, you guys, and helping out the people who are victimized by these systems is one of the few things that we can all do that makes a very tangible difference in an immediate sense. So support labor organizing, you guys. I think strikes are one of the most powerful forms of activism. I think that's one of the ways that you can actually achieve change in a short period of time, even if that change is not quite what you really want, right? You can actually move the needle with this stuff. And I hope that the workers that we've been discussing here today will take action and find success in that route as well. So I want to show you guys a clip here. I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I discussed a march for, it's the group March for Medicare for All, but some of their activists are putting an event on in San Francisco. It's to demand Medicare for All effectively and to condemn those who have refused to bring us Medicare for All. So this is Shareef Snuggs and Tsukuru Fours and Edwin DeJesus. They all sat down and discussed the event that they have going on and why you should get involved. So let me find it here. Just give me one moment. I apologize. Here we go. Enjoy. So we have a very exciting segment coming up. I'm very happy to be here with some Medicare for All activists. We have Shareef Snuggs, Tsukuru Fours, and Edwin DeJesus here to discuss an event coming up in San Francisco. Thank you all so much for taking the time to be here today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Luke.
So,
thank you.
So Edwin, can I start with you and just ask to give some of the background and how this all came about? Why Pelosi? Why San Francisco? Why this action in particular?
Yeah, so Nancy Pelosi is one of the most powerful Democrats in the country, and she has the authority to sway the party's direction. Because of her and because of Joe Biden, the DNC said last year that Medicare for All would not be a part of their platform. So if you support Medicare for All, you're actually not being represented by either the Republican or the Democratic Party. And that has a lot to do with the fact that Nancy Pelosi is bought and paid for by the private health insurance companies and big pharmaceutical industry. And as you can see with even progressive leaders like AOC in the squad, that sort of corporate-friendly politics trickles down onto their own politics, and it becomes a self-fulfilling cycle, a never-ending cycle of corporations and profit over people. So we are here to take it to the streets with our grassroots movement, moving beyond the March for Medicare for All and doing more targeted actions like this one in San Francisco.
Fantastic stuff. Yeah, I mean, Pelosi certainly has her hands in the coffers on all this kind of stuff. Do you think that attacking the very top is a way to kind of make that trickle-down effect that you were talking about work in our favor as opposed to against us?
So I think that there's multiple strategies that we can do concurrently. I support all of the state-level initiatives for single-payer healthcare across the country in various states, but why not at the same time go for the very top, go for one of the most powerful figures? Because if we can get federal legislation through the pressuring of our Congress members, I'm sure all the state initiatives would be on board with that. But, it's not mutually exclusive or one or the other, but we are taking this route because we feel that this is the best way that we can expedite the process of getting healthcare as a human right for all Americans as soon as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I do have to say, I have my own strong concerns about state by state initiatives. I think we need federal, period, because of the funding mechanisms, and we don't want to engage in the race to the bottom. But all on board with activism that builds towards that federal, federal Medicare for all bill. Do you think that Pelosi? This might be a naive question of me to ask, Edwin, but do you think that Pelosi is remotely malleable to these demands, or do you think this is more about getting other people around on board?
Do I think that Nancy Pelosi will ever pass progressive legislation before she ends up retiring? Probably not. But do I think that if we pressure her enough to change the direction of the party for the next generation? Yes.
Absolutely.
I think Nancy Pelosi is probably not very movable, but there definitely is a way that if enough people can actually scare the establishment through direct action on the streets, then anything can happen.
Fantastic answer. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that it's understood. We're not thinking that Pelosi's actually going to come on board here. There's other reasons that this is a very valuable thing to be doing.
Right.
And Tsukuru, can you maybe explain some of the specifics here? What exactly is happening on October 30th, and how can people get involved if they're interested in helping out?
Yeah, of course. So before I move on to the actual event in October, let me just give you a little side story about Nancy Pelosi. So when we did the march in July, actually she was invited to the march. Eric Curry, our co-organizer, and actually in San Francisco, sorry he couldn't join us today, but he and I delivered the invitation to Nancy Pelosi's house and slipped it under her door. But of course she didn't respond. So that's the situation. But anyhow, so October 30th, from noon to 2 p.m. is when the action's taking place. So it's a Day of the Dead action, specifically for the reason that, we think that Nancy Pelosi and Democrats have to answer to people of the United States for their inaction and negligence and causing the death of 68,000 people annually. And also like COVID death, we are up to like 688,000 right now. So 40% of which is estimated because of a lack of healthcare. So that's like 275,000. So she has to answer to that. So, we are billing this as, arguably the most haunted place in all of San Francisco is Nancy Pelosi's house. So we are going to gather in a nearby park, and we will do a procession, funeral style, to Nancy Pelosi's house. And we will have speakers in front of Nancy's house. And we will demand three things, basically. One, she sponsor Medicare for all. But not only that, proactively encourage, fellow Democrats and fellow Republicans to, sign up for Medicare for all, and do not sabotage any longer hearing of the, committees of jurisdiction. So that's
Right.
what we're demanding, basically.
Right.
It's a very powerful way to send the message. It's, there's not much more powerful than unnecessary death. That's about as strong a message as you can send against a politician. Say, hey, you've contributed to unnecessary death. It's astounding to me that we're still in this place. And Shareef, can you talk a little bit about who's involved here? Who are the players, and who's organizing this? How are you guys proceeding to try to use activism to make these kinds of tangible differences?
Yeah. So far we have PNHP. They're engaged right now with us. They're going to be co-sponsoring this event. We're going to be reaching out to more local activists, more local organizers to actually latch onto this. Every voice in the Bay Area needs to be heard, even if they're not initially a healthcare activist. There's a lot of room for crossover, and we want voices to be heard. And Edwin and Tsukuru made very valid points. We have to attack the top. We have to attack the duopoly. No incrementalism. We don't have time for that. COVID is so detrimental to our society right now. So we need to ask the locals. We need to hear their stories. And the more we hear more of those stories from the locals, the more engagement we're going to actually have for this movement, and it's going to grow even further, because those activists and organizers who are not necessarily Medicare for activists, they're going to get engaged. They're going to get in the street, and that's what we need. We need a lot of street heat, not just now, but just in general. And right now, currently, we have Laura Feldon of the Red Berets. She's going to be speaking. Dr. Joe Jarvis, he's going to be speaking. Jackson Hinkle, he's going to be speaking. Shahid Buttar, he's going to be speaking. Pat DeBurner, he's going to be speaking. So Eric Curry, he's going to be speaking. So we're really excited about this. I'm flying out from New York to San Francisco for that day. I'm not going to be speaking, but I'm definitely going to be there for a show of support and solidarity. I'll be helping out any way that I can. I'm just really excited about that. We're right now we're thinking about starting the visual early, so set the tone for the rest of the event. So we let people know why we're here, because it's about the dead. Obviously, that's what we're calling the Day of the Dead. And we're going to end with a coffin. So that, as of right now, Eric and Tsukuru will work on details of the rest of the event. But we think that would be a nice way to not only start, but also end the event.
That's great to hear that Shahid's going to be there too. I mean, running against her a couple times, and I hope he runs against her again.
Right.
This can just be, I suppose, for any of you. But one thing that I like that you guys are doing is, and perhaps Pelosi is a little bit of an exception to this, but exposing people who don't otherwise get exposed. Richie Neal is one of the most powerful members of Congress, and most people don't even know who the fuck he is.
Right.
So, that you guys are willing to take this fight to the front door of people who otherwise seem to evade any criticism for their actions, I think is fantastic. Can any of you speak to how that can be an effective form of activism, and what you hope to gain from sort of drawing that kind of attention on a regular basis?
Can I say something about
Yeah,
that?
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, thank you so much for mentioning that, Luke, because for this October 30th, our goal is not only do this kind of action in San Francisco, but we are calling out to all activists or anyone who wants to do anything about Medicare for all nationwide to do something in front of their representatives' house or office and demand Medicare for all. So it can be small, but our call is to just mobilize as many people as possible and directly approach their congressional representatives.
100%. We need everyone to get engaged. It can be five. It can be five of your friends. Doesn't matter. Just go to your congressperson, go to your senator's office, go to their home, wherever it is. Say the names. Remember the names of those who died this year. Let them know that their death wasn't in vain, because so many of our brothers and sisters are going to die this year because they don't have access to healthcare. They have no help. There's no one for them to actually reach out to support them. And we are going to have medical bills. That's one of the part of this action. We want Americans who don't know that a lot of our brothers and sisters are dying because they can't afford to pay their bills. Simple as that. And it's not fair.
And I'll throw this one back to Edwin here. It on kind of to carry on with Shareef's point there. It really seems to me, really both Tsukuru and Shareef's point. It seems to me like there's a distinction. Even Joe Biden himself, you hear him like very adamantly say no one should get a bill for COVID treatment, right? And he's actually pretty adamant about this point. And I would fire back with like, well, then why should someone get a bill for a diabetes treatment or for heart treatment or cancer or like any of this? So Edwin, can you speak a little bit to that kind of disconnect in our society, where in some ways we seem to acknowledge that this shouldn't cost people anything, and in other ways we seem to just kind of fall back on the rapacious for-profit healthcare system?
Yeah, so a lot of people said, okay, Joe Biden is this empathetic guy, but I really don't find it to be very empathetic when you say, I'm going to veto Medicare for all if it comes across my desk. If you look at Vice President Harris, for example, a co-sponsor of the bill, laughed and mocked the idea of Medicare for all when she was interviewed by 60 Minutes. So these flip-flops by politicians where on one end they seem empathetic, but on the other end they reveal their true colors, that's the nature of politics itself. There's a leadership vacuum on the left. Right now, obviously, we still have Bernie Sanders in the Senate fighting for this reconciliation bill, but who's out in the streets actually leading mass amounts of people for this revolution? To my knowledge, it's just us. It's us and alone. We have to be the ones who carry the torch of this progressive movement and do it ourselves. And we have to make sure that we take all of this energy that we have online and take it to the streets. Because even if it's just a few of us, 5 or 6 of us at each office, that's enough to scare the establishment. That's enough to put a dent in the matrix and actually get change done. People don't realize how effective you can be when it's just a few people causing a ruckus. We need the same type of energy that 2018 AOC had, bringing the ruckus to Nancy Pelosi's office, and keep it that way.
Right.
Absolutely. And another one, kind of for anyone who wants to answer this, it's one thing that's, I think, confusing in some ways is how a policy can be as popular as Medicare for All is and still be this far behind in terms of legislation, like not even close. You know, I mean, a lot of polls have it up at 75%. Some half of Republicans support Medicare for All in a lot of polls. And I mean, there are other issues like this too: money out of politics, Green New Deal, federal jobs guarantee, etc. They're all 70+%. And yet we can't get anywhere with this legislation. I'm curious to see how you guys think that making the representatives themselves uncomfortable with this kind of organizing and activism could maybe move the needle, you know, when we already have public approval on our side, if you will.
Edwin?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that have popular approval, but they never get done. For example, one of the things, Medicare for All in particular, 9 out of 10 Democrats support it. Majority of Republicans support it. But obviously, the more that we're united on the things that we do have similarities, the more that threatens the establishment. They would much rather keep us divided so that it's easier to conquer us. If they knew that we can come together as a populist coalition, then we'd overpower them. And it's all about power and control and making sure that they're the ones at the end of the day who maintain the status quo. And when we come together as ordinary people, that's what's going to shake things up.
Absolutely. 100%.
Yep. Anyone want to add on to that?
Yeah, just applying pressure in general. I don't think that, you know, putting partisan aside for a second, no matter if you're Republican or Democrat, we're all human beings. This is a human rights violation, full stop. The fact that we're actually negotiating who should live and who should die is gross and disgusting, and we need to draw attention to that. And the problem is that most people just think this is how it is. They're not informed, and we need to do a better job in informing our community. And this is why I was saying that we have to start reaching out to folks who are not just in healthcare. We need to start reaching out to any organizer, any activist, any group, any business in my understanding, and tell them, look, this is a problem. This is what's going on in your community. You can be next. Do you want this to happen to you and your loved ones? Your loved ones, your family members, your neighbors, your friends are all going to die this year because they can't afford a medical bill. Is that something that you can live with? And I be honest about that.
It's, you know, what's interesting is, like, for example, if you're like an extreme Scientologist who refuses to get their child medical care that they need can be prosecuted for that. And in my view, rightly so, can be prosecuted for that, right? Yet, when our system tells somebody we refuse to give you the care that you need to survive, is the system prosecuted for that? Is anybody going to jail for that? Is anybody getting sued for that? So we allow it when it's on this macro level. But if any individual or if a doctor were to turn down somebody at an ER who needed care, they would be in trouble for that. That would be malpractice. But when the system does it, when it's an insurance agency or company that sits there and says, no, we're not going to give you the surgery that you need, there doesn't seem to be that same kind of response.
Can I add?
Yeah,
something?
Please.
Yeah, so I also think that we need to be exposing the fact that, you know, politicians are so motivated, how they are motivated by money So, namely, how much money they are getting from healthcare industry and insurance industry, because so many people are not aware of that. So I mean, yeah. So pressuring politicians, but in a way that exposing them. Why? I mean, how it is like really a matter of profits over people, and how this is like motivated by capitalism, and I think that's important. So
100%. Yeah, I like to tell people I'm no fun at parties because I turn everything back to a critique of capitalism, and so I'm just no fun for anyone to be around because I complain about capitalism all the time. And this is another instance where that incentive structure very much is built in and cooked in from the start, and it leads to all these perverse incentive structures when it comes to the decision making. So, Shareef, can you just kind of close by talking a little bit about, we've talked a couple times when you've done organizing things before, the March for Medicare for All, the Richie Neal protest. Can you talk a little bit about where the steering committee is going from here, what you guys are thinking in a big picture sense you want to do in terms of activism and organizing? I'm very encouraged to see you guys continuing to do events. So can you just talk a little bit about what the group is doing now, what your focuses are, and how people can get involved?
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely have our UN action. We have a petition on our website. If you go to the M4A.org, you can easily see our UN petition. We're filing a complaint with the UN because the United States government refuses to include many of our brothers and sisters in healthcare. We just don't have it. So we're letting the UN know that at the end of the day, this is gross. And this is by their standards, by the UN standards, and by matter of fact, other country standards as well. This human rights violation. So the United States government is the only country, developed country, that's ignoring this basic human right. And so this is a flagrant violation. So we have that on the docket right now. We just had the Richie Neal action. We also have this Day of the Dead action. We also have a New York action that we're going to do a giant die-in in front of the Pfizer building, which I'm really excited about. We have another action that I'm planning right now in December. So right now we're just trying to keep applying pressure. We're thinking about other ways and other things we can do to not only just apply more pressure, but also get more engagement from the community. Currently right now, I'm trying to work on direct action trainings. I'm the worst person to train people, but I do have other brothers and sisters who have a lot more experience in activism and organizing than I do. And so what I would like to do is start in New York, start local here. And once it becomes successful, hopefully I can branch it out and have trainings for other organizers and activists across the country who are part of the March for Medicare Coalition.
That's fantastic. I'm so thrilled to hear that everything's going forward and continuing. M4A.org if you want to find out more. And I also am going to post in the description box of this live stream the specific event page for the San Francisco event coming up on October 30th. So I really want to thank you all so much for being here, and I really hope to have you all on again to discuss this and future actions. This is encouraging. I'm inspired. I'm usually pessimistic. You guys have pumped a little bit of life into me, so I want to thank you for that. And hopefully we can do this again soon. Thank you all so much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Luke.
Thank you so much, Luke.
Absolutely.
So fantastic stuff. Really encourage you guys to go to M4A.org and check out the actions that they're involved in. Get involved if you're in the San Francisco area, and look out for future events as well. Shout out to Shareef and Tsukuru and Edwin for taking the time to explain this and for continuing to work so hard on grassroots, on the ground organizing and activism, which is ultimately our only hope. So I really mean what I said there at the end. You guys, anyone who's a regular viewer of the show knows that I'm usually cynical and pessimistic, and it's always inspiring to see these kinds of events taking hold, and it's inspiring to see that people are really putting in the efforts to ensure that we make the changes that we need to make. As slow as politics often moves, never fast enough. It's always better late than never, and it's encouraging to see that we're still fighting, because without that fight, we're toast. There's before we even get into all the strategy discussions and all the disagreements on the left, we all have to be motivated. And I'm inspired to see this kind of action. So again, encourage you guys to get involved with not just M4A, but other grassroots groups as well. Do what you can to make sure that some noise is being made in your communities about exploitation and about, abuses in our healthcare system and our education system, all this kind of stuff, right? Make sure that your voice is being heard, get involved on that grassroots, on the ground kind of level. Community building, organizing protests, strikes, etc. This stuff is, to me, our only real hope. It's not to say we should cast electoral politics completely out the window. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I think if we're going to have any success in an electoral or a political sense, there has to be that backbone of activism and community building that can lead us to actually perhaps achieving some sense of positive change. So again, huge shout out to the M4A group and for Shareef, Edwin, and Tsukuru joining the show, and look forward to talking to them again soon. Get involved if you can. We're going to talk a little bit here about the infrastructure negotiations and where they're headed. That vote is tomorrow. I'm recording this on Sunday. It's Monday that the vote will be taking place for the bipartisan infrastructure bill. And essentially what's happening here, guys, is progressives need to hold firm and refuse to vote for it unless it is paired with the reconciliation bill. And it actually looks like they're going to. Pramila Jayapal, who is the chair of the Progressive Caucus in the House, came out and basically said that over half of that caucus is committed to holding firm on this and not allowing the bipartisan bullshit bill to pass without it being paired to the reconciliation bill. That's a promising sign. Usually the progressives end up capitulating by this point. So that is a strong sign. I'm glad to see that. We need the reconciliation bill as inadequate as it itself is. It's the only of the two bills that does anything that is substantive and beneficial and good. So, and lots of good you guys, as much as that bill is itself inadequate, I mean, even like Bernie wanted a lot more money than that. This was the proposal that he thought might get passed. But it is a lot of really good stuff in there, you guys. It addresses the climate in a way that that the bipartisan bill doesn't even come close to. Universal pre-K, community college for tuition-free community college. There's a lot in there that really is, as again, I feel like I have to keep doing this caveat because people on the left will misreceive what I'm saying. But despite its inadequacy, there is a lot of good in that bill, and we would all be better off if it passed. So I'm hopeful that the progressives will hold firm on this, and we'll get some semblance of an infrastructure bill. Again, as much as it's not the 10 or 15 trillion dollars that we really need immediately spent on infrastructure, if we were serious about addressing the problems. But looks like progressives are going to hold firm. I want to start with a clip of what's the guy's fucking name? Gottheimer, Representative Gottheimer, who went on cable news. I don't even remember which channel. They're all very similar. Doesn't much matter. And he made an argument here that I think is entirely disingenuous and quite hypocritical, I suppose you could say. We'll watch this clip and then I'll explain to you guys what I mean by that.
Know the answer to the question. The reason that it's not going to be voted on tomorrow is because House progressives are worried that more moderate Democrats such as you or more conservative Democrats like Senator Joe Manchin will kill the reconciliation deal, the Build Back Better Act, if they don't make sure that it's a quid pro quo. They will vote for infrastructure as long as you vote for reconciliation. Let me just ask you, though,
well,
go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I just want to be clear about that. I support reconciliation. So do my colleagues. We meet all the time. And let me tell you, we all agree that we need a reconciliation package. And I think that's important for everyone to understand. But that doesn't mean these are two separate bills, right? You've got infrastructure and historic once in a century. There's no reason why we shouldn't pass that right away and get those shovels in the ground and make sure we can do everything we can to stop derailments and invest in our infrastructure and climate and make sure we fight climate change. And then also we should keep working on this separate bill on reconciliation, which I'm committed to passing, and
right.
As Pramila said, we're talking all the time to make sure we can get that done as well.
Okay. Did you guys catch that? He really wants to make everybody at home think these are two separate bills. So what does that really actually mean? First of all, as it applies to this specific situation, what that means is I don't want the reconciliation bill to pass. He can sit there and say, I support reconciliation, all that he wants. If you make them separate bills, the reconciliation bill ain't going to fucking pass. So he's totally contradicting himself in less than a minute by saying that. Okay, so that's the first piece of it. As it pertains to this situation, if you want to decouple those bills, you don't want the reconciliation bill to pass. That's first of all. Second of all, Josh Gottenheimer is the co-chair of the Problem Solvers Caucus. Okay, that's like the moderate, we're gonna cosplay bipartisan, as Breonna Joy Gray says, caucus. That's what they play up all of that, the fetishization of bipartisanship, and we can work together and yada yada yada. We get things done, yada yada. That group. The conservative Democrats, the moderate Democrats, the corporatists is really the way to kind of describe them. They have no problem tanking a bill over an earmark that has nothing to do with that bill. For him to sit there and say these are separate bills, separate issues, is beyond hypocrisy. That is rank, like it's unbelievable hypocrisy. They have no problem tanking any bill over some fucking tax cut that has nothing to do with the bill, that they demand gets put into the bill. These moderates, these conservatives, will sit there and tank a bill over the salt tax or some bullshit. No problem at all. So for him to sit here and say, yeah, I support both, but they're separate bills. I'm sorry, you're part of the group that constantly tries to attach bullshit and earmarks that have nothing to do with the bill in question to every bill you possibly can. For him to act like he doesn't understand what progressives are doing here is so beyond stupid. I mean, it's lazy is really what it is. It's quite cheap. We all see through that, Josh. Any of us who pay an iota of attention to politics see right through your fucking garbage. But does Jake Tapper question him on that? Does Jake press him on that? No, of course he doesn't. He lets him come on and he plays stenographer for the fucking corporatists. Unreal. Really unreal. This tactic that they use on a regular basis to support billionaires and corporations and banks and military contractors and etc. No problem invoking this strategy to protect those groups. But then as soon as the progressives try to invoke this power play and this strategy to get a bill that is desperately needed, he's like, these are separate bills. Why don't we separate them? What are you talking about? What a crock of shit. So I wanted to show you guys that. I also have a article here. This is in The Intercept. Ryan Grimm. Dark money group to donors. Reconciliation bill can still be killed. In a leaked email, No Labels director praised Senator Kirsten Sinema. Kirsten, I always say Kristen, you guys. I don't know why I do that. Kirsten Sinema for her heroic efforts on the infrastructure bill. The dark money group, No Labels, remains optimistic that it has been able to de-link the bipartisan infrastructure bill away from the larger reconciliation package that includes the bulk of the Biden agenda, with the possibility of outright killing the bigger bill still in play, according to a note sent by the group's executive director to its donors. Quote, it is now clear that the reconciliation package will be de-linked in time from the infrastructure bill and will be less than $3.5 trillion if it passes at all. In theory, making support from House Republicans for the infrastructure bill more likely, the email from Margaret White reads. The message goes on to applaud Arizona Democratic Senator Kirsten Sinema for her relentless fight on their behalf. The reconciliation package includes major investments in combating climate change, support for child care and elder care, and expansion of Medicaid and Medicare, among a host of other policy advances. But major donors to No Labels stand to see significant tax hikes to offset those costs if the reconciliation package becomes law. The House Ways and Means Committee approved $2.9 trillion in new taxes on the rich over the next decade. And I wanted to read that paragraph to you guys because I actually really want to compliment Ryan Grimm for how he framed that. You almost always will see the media frame that as these taxes are paying for the infrastructure bill or the reconciliation bill. And he said it's offsetting some of the cost. That is a technically accurate way to describe it. And I just wanted to compliment him because you almost never see that in any press outlets, really. You see the totally incorrect and incoherent tax to spend rhetoric being pushed, the framework of neoliberalism being pushed in the press all the time. For him to say it's, the taxes are offsetting some of the cost. That's an accurate way to describe it. Now, those taxes aren't necessary to fund the program. We all know that. MMT informs us of all this. But I liked that he framed it that way. The point here, however, is No Labels clearly thinks that they have won this little back and forth, and they clearly think that cinema has propelled them to victory. I'm hoping that progressives will hold firm. I'm not naive enough to assume that to be the case, but it does appear, even as of very recently, that there are dozens of progressives, or even, progressives might be kind of a dubious term to describe some of these people, but there are dozens of people who are in the progressive caucus who appear willing to go to the mat on this one. And that's at least a positive, right? I know we live in this world where there's very little to be happy about in politics, and I don't want my approval of this bill to be, misconceived. I don't want to be misinterpreted as thinking that this bill is adequate, because it's not, but it is something, and I want to see it passed. So No Labels here appears very confident that they have done their job in killing it. But just to tie it back into that Gottheimer clip, it's very clear. No Labels clearly understands why these bills need to be delinked. That's the term they keep using, delink the bills. Well, Gottheimer plays stupid on this on national television and thinks that the viewers are dumb enough to believe him. Meanwhile, No Labels has no problem just openly admitting this, right? So I'm very hopeful that No Labels is wrong, and I'm hopeful that we get some form of robust reconciliation bill. I do want to note, though, you guys, even if the reconciliation bill goes forward, it has to go through the reconciliation process. So it has to pass the Senate, then the House, and then the Senate again. And that means that things will be negotiated out of it. It's almost certain that you won't see $3.5 trillion. Our best hope is to see something close to that. So this whole process of negotiation has been interesting in the sense that progressives have held stronger on this later than they usually do, and we'll see if they actually follow through on it tomorrow and tank the bipartisan bill. And I also want to note that there's that fetishization of bipartisanship is such a ridiculous and harmful thing, because really voters don't care about it. It's the media so plays it up that it becomes part of our narratives, even though voters really don't give a shit, you guys. Do you look back at the most important things we've ever done? Do you look back at the New Deal and say, well, how many Republicans voted for it? Do you look back at the civil rights bills and the Voting Rights Act and this kind of thing? Do you look back at those bills and say, well, how many Republicans supported it? I mean, it's any good thing that has ever passed. You can look back and often it was not bipartisan. Nobody fucking cares, but the media likes to pretend that they do. People care about how bills affect their lives. Okay, if you expand Medicare and Medicaid, if you offer universal pre-K and tuition-free community college to people, do you think as they're benefiting from this in their day-to-day lives that they're going to sit back and go, well, but how many Republicans voted for it? I don't want it to pass if Republicans didn't vote. It's so fucking ridiculous. It's a completely baseless line of thinking. The narrative is just entirely rooted in nonsense. And it's unfortunate that it's so pervasive, but it seems like the mainstream press really likes to play that up. Oh, it's bipartisan. It's bipartisan. Yeah, so are all the wars. So's letting the banks get away with fraud and corruption. That's bipartisan too. Does that make it good? It's insane, you guys. It's honestly insane. You know what else is bipartisan, at least among the powerful? Not giving us Medicare for all, not giving us a Green New Deal, not giving us a federal jobs guarantee, even though all of those things poll over 70%, some of them well over 70%. Bipartisanship is not inherently good. Get that idea out of your head if you have let the mainstream press instill it in your head to start with. It's not a good thing. It's almost always a negative thing. So we'll see if, and by the way, that's the reason that these things were detached in the first place. They never should have been separate bills. This all could have been done through reconciliation. And if the Biden administration and Democrats weren't so set on having a bipartisan bill, see, we can work with the monsters across the aisle. Who the fuck cares? It's honestly insanity to me, and it makes me want to pull my goddamn hair out. So we will see what happens tomorrow. I hope that the progressives hold firm, and obviously we will go into next week what comes of that vote and what things look like going forward. But I'm hopeful that we will get some semblance of that $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill. We shall see. So I do want to touch on the AOC vote that. Obviously, for those who didn't see what happened, progressives ended up sort of... let me start from before that. The latest budget bill originally included in the original negotiations, included an increase of $1 billion for funding for Israel's Iron Dome. Okay? The Iron Dome, for those that don't know, is a missile defense system that protects Israel, okay? And progressives ended up basically saying, no, we're not voting for that budget bill if it has an increase of $1 billion for Israel's Iron Dome defense system. And it ended up not being part of the budget bill. So that budget bill passes. The very next day, the Congress brings back to the floor a separate vote for that $1 billion increase for the Iron Dome defense. And again, I want to make sure everybody understands this is an increase in funding. It's not even just passing what we already were giving them. It's an increase in funding. Okay. And 9 progressives held firm and voted no. The vote was 400 and something to 9 in favor of adding the $1 billion to the Iron Dome. And 9 progressives voted against it, right? Presley voted against it. Tlaib voted against it. Cori Bush voted against it. Marie Newman voted against it, and others, right? AOC originally voted no and then changed at the last moment to present. There was another representative or two that voted present. I didn't recognize them. They weren't particularly progressive. And a couple of progressives, including Ro Khanna, voted yes on it. Jamal Bowman voted yes on this bill. Deeply disappointing vote. Okay. And AOC's last minute change. And then she like bursts into tears on the House floor. And listen, you guys, I get so fucking sick and tired of half of my Twitter feed being about AOC. I like the whole dress thing. I just could not possibly care less. Like, I don't give a fuck about that kind of nonsense. Okay. But when she continues to do this stuff, this is like a tangible vote. You had a moment where you could have made a statement. Obviously, you're not going to change the result of the vote, which makes her vote even more questionable. Like, would it have been different if it was 400 and something to 10? No, it wouldn't have. But at least you would be abiding by your principles. You know, at least you would be like actually living up to what you said you would do. But she changes her vote to present. And then she comes out the next day and like apologizes for it. I mean, you guys, like, what do you want me to say? Again, I want to be clear. I find AOC to be oddly polarizing. Like, I really don't quite understand the people who on either side of this. I don't understand the sycophants who think she's like the greatest thing since sliced bread and will defend her no matter what. And I also don't understand the people who like think she's the second coming of Satan and like will find a way to criticize literally everything she does. I understand neither groups. I don't look at politicians that way, you guys. I don't expect a lot from politicians. And I just don't do this like individual character assassination thing. I look at things more systemically than that. And I'm not trying to pat myself on the back. I think that this hyper focus on a character like AOC is more damaging to the left than anything else. People on both sides, like, focus on tangible shit that actually can make a difference, you guys. I usually take that stance. And there's a reason I did not cover AOC's fucking dress last week, because I think it's just nonsense. I don't think it matters. I don't think it's relevant, right? But this is very much relevant. This is a vote on the House floor. This is her going against the principles that she ran on and then acting all upset about it. And I don't even doubt that she was genuinely upset about it, but then why did you vote that way? And there are a few potential answers. I mean, she has brought in a bunch of establishment type advisors and things to her staff who may be pointing her in the entirely wrong direction. That's happened over the course of the last couple of years. She also very well may have been worried because a number of her constituents in New York are Jewish, and she like might have thought it was politically necessary to vote this way. But that wouldn't excuse it. that would make it all the worse. That means you're playing politics in the most cynical and disgusting way imaginable, right? So I don't know what to say about this other than it is deeply disappointing to see the direction that AOC is taking. Deeply, deeply disappointing. When she first protested and did a sit-in in Pelosi's office, I thought, boy, we might actually have someone here, right? And to at the last second capitulate to the establishment in this manner it's disgusting. And it also the way she did that makes me think that she's quite impulsive and doesn't really know what the hell she's doing. I mean, you have to know going into that how you're going to vote. How do you not have that decided going in? What would compel you to change your mind in that way? I very literally don't understand, but any of the potential answers are deeply concerning, right? And it also, you know what, it if AOC has any serious principled intention to make a difference, which I think she internally probably does, right? I don't think she's intentionally malicious. I don't think she's, so if that's the case, if she really does want to make a difference, and if she really does believe in progressive policy, then by doing this, you're discouraging your own base from supporting you and from pushing Congress to do the things that you claim and purport to want. So it's harmful in every conceivable way. I don't understand what in the fuck she thought she was doing. I genuinely do not understand it. And it's just deeply concerning no matter what the explanation is. So really, really disappointed in AOC. You need to fucking shape up. The stunts that have been pulled lately are deeply discouraging. And I think lefties are well within their rights to be concerned about and disappointed in AOC. And that's not something I want to get up here and say, you guys. I wish like hell that there was a bunch of members of Congress that I could sit here and confidently defend. I wish that was the case, but I'm not going to lie to you guys. And AOC has not lived up lately to the expectations that she set with her own campaign and with her rhetoric and with her positions and her statements. So this was a deeply disappointing vote. I also, on a more nuanced level, specific to Israel, you guys, the Iron Dome is not in a vacuum something that I oppose, because it actually is pure self-defense. It's it's not offensive. It's literally just dealing with incoming missiles, right? So in a vacuum, the Iron Dome isn't necessarily some sort of problem. What makes this problematic is that our continuing to support Israel and provide resources to Israel in this way allow them to direct the rest of their resources to the illegal settlements, to the ethnic cleansing campaign in the West Bank, to the violence that they inflict, the war crimes they commit in Gaza, etc. So you're allowing them to continue their crimes against humanity by filling in resource gaps elsewhere. You see what I mean? If they had to fund that Iron Dome defense system themselves and actually apply their own resources to it instead of taking American weapons and American resources to create these programs, then they may not be as able to participate in their crimes against humanity elsewhere and in their illegal occupations and settlements elsewhere. So it's also just an overall, when a country is behaving as Israel behaves, you shouldn't fucking support them, right? United States does this all the time. We claim our foreign policy is rooted in humanitarianism, and then we support Israel and we support Saudi Arabia and we support 70 or 80% of the world's dictatorships. So we're completely full of shit, you guys. We give weapons to the UAE as they use them to commit a genocide against Yemen, etc. Right? On and on. I showed one of the first shows I ever did for Real Progressives. We showed that clip of Noam Chomsky, who went down every single post-World War II president and the crimes that they'd committed. That's who the United States is. And then we turn around and say, well, our foreign policy is rooted in humanitarianism. Give me a fucking break. And this kind of vote demonstrates just how adamant our government and our leaders and our political parties and establishment are in continuing that particular policy. So really disappointed in AOC here. Really fucking disappointed in AOC. And that's not to say that my expectations going into this vote of her were high. She has been disappointing me for quite some time now. So I hope like hell that turns around, you guys. And here's the thing. I would encourage lefties to be open to that. And if she does turn around, give her credit. Don't do what the establishment does, which is engage in character assassinations and work backwards from your preconceived conclusion. Don't do that shit. When representatives do things that are worthy of condemnation, condemn them. When they do things worthy of praise, praise them. That's just I don't like this hyper individual mentality about politicians, right? Not a single, the best politician in the world would fuck up, and they should be criticized for fucking up. But they also, when they do something great, should be praised. So like, I just really want to encourage everybody not to get into the silos, like casting people into good or bad silo and then working back from that. I want to encourage people not to do that. But in this case, certainly worthy of criticism. Shame on AOC for this bullshit. And lastly, we have a remarkable clip here. This is Joy Behar of The View, who gives her opinions on Bill Clinton's plethora of sexual assault allegations. This is specific to Lewinsky, but it's a remarkable clip, not in a good way, just remarkable. So we'll watch this clip and then come back and discuss.
I would submit here that the real victim was the United States of America because, and Hillary Clinton, because if you remember when the debate was going on between Trump and Hillary, Trump brought in all these so-called victims of Clinton's peccadillos, right? Okay?
And if they had brought in, if Democrats had done the same and brought in Donald Trump's victims and those who alleged,
they wouldn't have done anything.
Oh, they would have needed an arena.
Exactly.
And to be clear, there were a lot of.
He allegedly abused a lot of women. Bill Clinton.
Yeah,
he
but when he brought those women into that debate, that hurt Hillary Clinton. And that is the real victim. The country lost a great person. Hillary Clinton could have been the president instead of that criminal that we had there for 4 years. And that's the real victim, and that's the real loser.
I want to push back.
Where do you even start with that? She responds, she's told lots of women allege that Bill Clinton sexually assaulted or harassed them. Lots of women have. And Joy Behar starts with, yeah, but. Yeah, but. Imagine how Joy would have responded if someone else on The View said that about Dr. Ford. Or said that about one of Trump's accusers. Yeah, but. I mean, where do you even start with that clip? You know, like that's so, it makes me want to take a fucking shower. And then she goes on and she says, instead of that criminal in office, meaning Trump, right? We could have had Hillary Clinton. No, the criminal in question here is Bill Clinton for rape. That's the criminal in question here. Trump obviously also a criminal in a number of respects, and obviously also deserves to be condemned for how he treats and abuses women. Okay? Obviously that's true. That shouldn't even need to be said. But here's Joy just engaging in whataboutism. Oh, yeah, Clinton's a rapist, but. How disgusting. And this shows you how politicized the Me Too movement was from the start. And that's a real shame because it's a real problem and it really needs to be addressed. I mean, I'm beside myself over this response from Joy Behar. Not surprised, but beside myself. It reminds me, you guys, of Jerry Seinfeld does that thing where he drives around in a car with other comedians and talks. And there was this scene, Norm Macdonald, rest in peace to Norm. If you guys didn't see, he passed away recently. He was on Jerry's show and they were talking, and something came up about how the real shame in, I don't remember which specific allegation it was, but some other comedian had said that the real shame in the scandal was like how it had been manipulated to people for people's public interest, right? And McDonald said, you know, I don't really think that is the biggest problem with this scandal. I think the biggest problem with this scandal was the rape. That's the problem here, is that someone committed rape. And that's what I would say to Joy. The problem here is not the reverberating political implications. If you don't want Trump to be president because of this, then maybe Bill Clinton shouldn't have raped all those women. Maybe he shouldn't have abused his power in the case of Monica Lewinsky, right? mean, it's just the narratives around this stuff, you guys, are so beyond disgusting. There was also the classic line as pertaining to Jennifer Flowers, who was another accuser of Bill Clinton during his campaign. And what's the guy's name? Fucking Democratic strategist, starts with a C. Oh, someone can put James Carville. He had this line. His response to the Jennifer Flowers accusations were, "If you drag $100 bill through a trailer park, you never know what you're going to find." That's the people who want you to believe that they support Me Too and that they support women. It is just disgusting. I don't have enough words in my vocabulary to properly express my contempt for these fucking people. To be a hypocrite on an issue like this is just well beyond the pale. Shame on Joy. Shame on Joy. And shame on anybody who apologizes for Clinton and his sexual assaults and sexual harassment. You're telling on yourself when you do that. You're telling on yourself. You're saying, I only believe accusations that are against Republicans. I really don't know where else to go with that. It is so beyond the pale and so outrageous and ridiculous and unacceptable. And unfortunately what it does is it puts sort of a smear on what is a very important issue and a very important movement. So shame on Joy Behar. How fucking dare you? How disgusting, how nauseating. Shame on you. That's just outrageous. Unbelievable. So with that, guys, I will call it a stream for the week. Hope everybody has a good one. Let's hope the progressives hold firm tomorrow. And I will see everybody next Sunday. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you don't miss that new Untouchables episode tonight with Thomas Frank. Make sure you check out all of our other content at realprogressives.org. Help us out if you want to donate to our Patreon, etc., etc. And with that, you guys have a wonderful week. I'll see you next Sunday.